Hello everyone, I'm back. This is Tom, and the weather today is really awful, so I decided I'd make another video since there's not much else to do. I had a question or a confusion from one of my students regarding two words, beside and besides, so I figured for their sake I would make a video since we can use this to help some other of my students as well. I also got some feedback from one of my students that I should have a little bit more visual aid in some of my videos. So maybe at some point I'll do some more nice video editing, but for now, we get to just see how great of an artist I am. We're gonna use some flashcards. I've seen this in some other channels. It sometimes can be effective. So we'll start with the word beside. So this is the most basic preposition. So this is generally the same as next to or on the side of. So in this picture, there's a person, that's a dog. Just trust me on that, that's a dog. And the person is beside the dog, or the dog is beside the person. The bench, this is a bench. The bench is beside the river. The bench is beside the river. Here's a bunch of people. There is a tall person beside many little people. There's a tall person beside maybe some small children. All right, so when we talk about beside, meaning next to, it seems to be a little bit limited to meaning on the side of. For example, if this person was telling this person where they are, they might say behind the bench, but from their perspective, they're on the side of the bench. So they might say, I'm beside the bench, or I'm next to the bench. And both of those are fine. I would also say behind the bench, but that's more from our perspective. We would say behind, but she could say she's next to the bench, she's beside the bench. However, if I'm looking at this photo, I could also say she's next to the bench from my perspective, because next to sometimes also carries the meaning of near. This isn't very precise or accurate, but this is something that natives will say. So I could say she is next to the bench. She is close to the bench. She is near the bench. I wouldn't say beside the bench. This sounds a little bit weird to say because she's not on the side of the bench. She's behind the bench. So it feels more precise and accurate to say behind the bench. There may be some disagreement around this, but beside to me sounds a little more like it really does need to be on the side of something from the perspective of whoever's speaking. So he's beside the dog, next to the dog. She's next to the bench, behind the bench. She says she's beside the bench because that's from her perspective. She sees it on her side. All right, so moving on, or just one other note on this is when we talk about beside versus next to in writing, for example, beside tends to sound a little bit more formal. I would be more likely to use beside in a more formal text. However, you could also use both, and it's a good way to create some variety in your writing. Next to, beside, on the side of, etc. All right, so I think that's all from this one. So this one's somewhat related. Beside, meaning compared to. So see these four people. This is something that used to just mean next to, but it now can have a little bit of a different meaning compared to. This child, or this person, or this child, looks tall beside the other children. He is next to the children, and he looks tall compared to them. He looks tall beside the children. So this doesn't seem that different when you first hear it, but we have now begun using this in a more figurative or metaphorical way. For example, and this is a little bit of an advanced topic, the ideas of democracy aren't perfect, but they are the best beside the alternatives. They are the best beside the alternatives. You could imagine you have democracy monarchy and other forms of government like next to each other, beside each other, and you're looking at them compared to each other. This is how we sometimes use this to mean compared to. You have a few options and you are comparing one of them to the others. The ideas of democracy aren't perfect, but they are the best beside the alternatives. All right, next one. So there's two expressions using beside that are kind of fixed expressions. And the first one is beside oneself. Beside oneself. So this is a girl, she's crying, there's a grave. This indicates she's sad or grieving. So to be beside oneself, she is beside herself. You are beside yourself. I am beside myself. The oneself changes based on the person. So she is beside herself, meaning she is upset, has extreme emotions, sadness, maybe anger. She is beside herself. You can also say she is beside herself with sadness, with grief. In this way, you can say that somebody is beside themselves with a positive emotion, with joy. This sounds a little bit strange to me. I generally think of beside oneself as being a negative emotion or being overwhelmed with negative emotions or surprise. But it is also possible if you specify what someone is beside themselves with joy. Beside oneself with joy. If there is no with, if you just say somebody is beside themselves, then it sounds like it's a negative emotion, either grief, sadness. So anyway, I realize my drawing needs a little bit of work, but that is beside the point. So this is another fixed expression that natives actually misspeak relatively often. This one, I've heard it both ways. In fact, I've caught myself saying this a different way, and that is adding the S. So here, the expression, as we know it, is no S, it's just beside the point. That is beside the point. Here, you are saying that something doesn't matter or is irrelevant. This is pretty common during an argument or a debate. So here I've got some roommates, and they're talking about, maybe this one's saying there's money in a bottle. Maybe she's accusing her of spending too much on alcohol. And her roommate is saying, well, it's nice alcohol, so I'm happy about it. Maybe they share rent and there's some money issues. So they're having an argument. And then this roommate brings up also that this roommate maybe had a car accident recently. So they're talking about spending too much money on other things, but then she starts talking about a car accident in the middle of the same argument. And so she might say, that's beside the point. That's not part of this argument. That is not relevant. So she might think it's relevant. She might think it's connected, and she disagrees. She says, that's beside the point. That is not something we talk about now. All right. So like I said, natives sometimes say besides the point here. It's a pretty common native error, so to speak. So you may hear that, but beside the point is the generally accepted correct form. All right, so speaking of besides. So now we'll move on to several uses of besides. So the first meaning is something like in addition to, or also. Besides such and such, I also do such and such. So here's a picture, that's me. It's obvious, but I pointed it and told you it's me as well. But so the first example is, green is my favorite color. This is a true story. Green is my favorite color. It's number one. However, besides green, I also like blue and orange. Besides green, I also like blue and orange. Blue and orange are the football colors for the Broncos, the Colorado team, and I'm from Colorado, so besides green, I also like blue and orange. All right, next example is I'm a native English speaker, but I also like to learn languages. So I speak English. Besides that, I also speak a little bit of German, Spanish, and Japanese. Besides English, I also speak a little bit of Spanish, German, and Japanese. So another example, besides languages and these colors, I'm also a great artist. Besides languages and these colors, I also am a great drawer, a great artist. Take my word for it. The one other thing I want to say is this can often be shortened to besides that, if we already know what you're talking about. For example, I love green. Green is my favorite color. Besides that, I also like blue and orange. Now, besides that is often also used as a filler word by natives. Besides that, what else? It has the same meaning, but it can be used as a way to pause and think. All right. Next definition, which is a little bit quite different actually, is besides something, meaning except for something. So this person's not very happy. I tried to draw him shrugging his shoulders. He doesn't know why everybody was invited to the party besides him. Everyone was invited to the party besides him, except for him. So this is a little bit different than the in addition to, so don't get too confused about those, but besides him, everyone was invited to the party. I am great at everything besides drawing. All right. Last but not least is besides. Besides. This is a little bit of an informal way of continuing or saying regardless or despite that. Besides. This is a bit more of a conversational word. It's a little bit informal. I wouldn't use it in writing. Using it during conversations is a little more appropriate. I would use some more detailed words or higher level words, more formal words like regardless, things that are more specific. And I just had to make sure, by the way, speaking of native errors, that I didn't write the word irregardless. So I didn't, and so that's great. I'll do a video at some point about native errors and what I think about those. But in any case, moreover, there's several options for if you're writing. Besides, it sounds a little bit more conversational. All right, so that's it for the examples part. So next we'll do a short input exercise. Spoiler warning, if you haven't seen the TV show WandaVision, stop right now, go watch that show. It's really good. And besides that, it's a good way to practice your English. WandaVision is a TV series created by Marvel Studios this year. Besides WandaVision, they created other shows such as Loki and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. However, beside these others, WandaVision is my favorite. It opens up with Wanda and Vision, two superheroes from the Avengers team, sitting beside each other in a 50s car in a black and white setting. This is odd because this takes place after the events of the Avengers movies, during which Vision had died. The scenery looks a lot like the sitcom Dick Van Dyke from the 50s. In each episode, the scenery changes, creating a parody of other sitcoms through American history, such as The Brady Bunch and Bewitched. Besides Wanda and Vision, there are no other characters from the Avengers, and they don't seem to remember or talk about any of those events either. In fact, at one point during the Brady Bunch 70s episode, one of the other characters brings up an event from one of these movies to Wanda, and Wanda becomes so angry, she throws this person out of wherever they are. As the series progresses, we learn more and more that Wanda is controlling everything. The scenery, the time, and even the people in the town that they are living in. Besides Wanda, there's one other magical person living in this area who later reveals themselves to be the witch Agatha Harkness. Agatha Harkness takes Wanda on a walk through her traumatic history as a way to manipulate her into giving her her magic. During this scene, we see Wanda walk up to the foundation of a house with a deed from Vision after his death. She's standing beside the entrance and is so beside herself with grief, she loses control of her powers and they create a house around her. Besides the house, they expand outwards and turn the entire city into a 50s sitcom. So this is how we find out how everything was being controlled. In the end, Wanda defeats the witch Agatha and frees the town of her magic, and everyone lives happily ever after. Well, except Wanda gets away with basically taking over an entire town with mind control, but that's beside the point. So hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any feedback, and we'll see you next time.